Welcome back to another edition of the Pocket Locker Podcast. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, good people, I am in. Airplane mode. And speaking of airplane mode, Cuz has a birthday coming up. So we might have to get OG Roddy the actual airplane mode on the show soon. And for those of you that don't know, check out airplane mode. It's airplanemode.com. It's airplanemode.com to check out that great music, get some dope merch, maybe even book airplane mode for some DJ services if you really need to get down like that. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining me and for coming back to the show. Today we gonna do something interesting. Y'all, it's been a hell of a day. Is Elon really quitting? Did y'all hear that Elon is quitting? I think somebody playing an April Fool's joke on me. I don't think it's real. I think that's an April Fool's joke. I think the Onion or somebody's trying to get one over on me. That sounds too good to be true. Did y'all hear this nonsense? And did y'all see Cory Booker? What's going on with this man? Look, I woke up, saw the man doing this filibuster thing. Those of you that don't know, Cory Booker's been a mentor of mine since I was like literally 12 years old. Man's literally like family to me. He had me all emotional and choking up, and then my students was talking about, I've been all over the place. And we talking about the liberalism, the fascism pipeline. He kind of represents liberalism. So I don't know. It's been all over the place kind of day, y'all. But look, I appreciate y'all for being here. I see PC in the chat. Always grateful. Lena is here. Robin is here. Y'all, Carrie Ann's around. We had Carrie Ann hanging out and gathered, playing some games with Lena or something. Oh man, the captain is back, man. That's crazy. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this. I gotta be honest with y'all. I feel like I'm kind of new to this. You know, I'm gonna give credit where credit is due. You know, people in our community, especially people like Lena, always pushing on me to really be more revolutionary, to really live out my values better, and you know, to not fall for like the liberal bullshit and really show some camaraderie and get things moving towards real socialism or even communism. So, but like most people, I'm new, right? Because I live in America, and it's really just conservative versus liberal, red versus blue, donkeys versus elephants, Democrats versus Republicans, you know, and it's hard sometimes to really get perspective of like, how did we get here, and what can we even do from here? So first thing, we got to understand where we at to understand how to get where we're going. And then the other thing is, I have some interesting thoughts on these things that might surprise you as an evolutionary biologist. One of the things that's so interesting about the life I lead is kind of tragedy and opportunity at the same time. It's tragedy because I feel like so much of the world still rejects evolutionary thinking and doesn't realize what a tremendous, realize first of all, it's the only game in town. It's the only valid explanation of the origin of species, the only real, evidence-based theory that explains how we all got here. So you might just want to get on board because there ain't no other real alternatives. But a lot of times we kind of, even people who do accept it or do have some understanding of it, tend to keep it over there like, oh yeah, evolution, that's how we explain the origin of species, or that's how we explain biodiversity, whatever. It's like hopefully at least when I say something like evolution is the core of modern biology, hopefully people are on board with that. But the tragedy is that we don't use an evolutionary framework to think beyond biology, to think about our psychology and how it evolved, to think about sociology, to think about anthropology, to think about economics and political science, right? So really, that's a tragedy, because we're not working with the full toolkit. We're not working with a proper theoretical framework to help us understand life, right? Because again, evolution is the core of biology, and that means it's the core of the science of how we study life. and all them other things are still related, right? But it's kind of opportunity, you know, because it's something I get to talk to my students about. It's something I get to kind of teach. It gives me a unique voice even within evolutionary biology. So hopefully we'll do a little remix. There'll be some times to throw in some of that perspective and how it relates to this discussion. All right, let's jump into, let's roll some tape. All right, so here we go. Also, should give shout out to the people who made this video. This video is really good. Overzealots, I wasn't even subbed. I'm gonna go hit them with the sub, hit them with the noties. Okay, this is very, 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 very high quality, informative content that you know, it's people putting their work in on YouTube, and this is certainly one of those channels. All right, let me go over here and open a new tab. At least I could drop the link on y'all. All right, let's rotate.
Americans are being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken. But all over the world, they're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia. And you know who's being hurt the most by millions of people pouring into our country? The black population and the Hispanic population. The crime is
gang, hearing him even say the words black and Hispanic makes my brain hurt. I don't want Trump ever fucking talking about people of color. Like, yeah. I get it. Some people say he can't really be racist because to be racist, you gotta. I don't give a shit about none of that. This motherfucker hates black people. He hates niggas. Like, just straight up. I mean, like, come on now. Come on now. I don't care if he got the energy or not. Is he making our lives worse? Oh, might be the one thing he's actually good at.
Tremendous. The
racism.
Unions are suffering because of it. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
Woo, did y'all hear it? Did y'all hear it? Did you hear it? They're poisoning the blood of our country. How do we elect a person who say something like that, y'all? How? I don't understand. I don't understand. And if you're a black conservative, not one drop. Look it up, motherfucker. Not one drop. It's the problem. Motherfuckers don't know history no more. Not one drop. They didn't want one drop of our blood messing their shit up. Okay. And then the same thing you hear in the Holocaust. How are people's heads not exploding when this man says they're poisoning the blood of our country? And this is see, I'm already like more pissed at our side than the other side. This is why I'm so sick of people telling us we need to reach across the aisle, we need to work with these people. Da, 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 da. Do you hear the things they say? Let's be real. Why did he get elected? Y'all, we gonna keep it a buck around here. He got elected because he said that. He got elected because that's exactly what racist motherfuckers wanted to hear. And he found the perfect dog whistle, the perfect thing to say to let the bigots know I'm your guy. And the problem is there's so many people supposedly on our side who just, I get it. Let me tell you something. I get it. Racism, bigotry. Okay, for those of us that have been living with it our whole lives and literally have generational trauma. You know what I'm talking about, generation? You can find the most privileged, well-off black person on the fucking planet. They are still traumatized by being black. They done dealt with some shit. They done experienced some shit. Somebody done said or done some shit to them. And it's like crazy. And even in the absence of those things happening to you, they happen to your parents. They happen to your grandparents. And so there's no way to grow and develop as a black person and not hear those stories or understand, you know, why your parents the way they are, why your grandparents the way they are, and all of that without understanding the trauma. And so the stories you hear that get passed down and just the way black people feel about being black, like you just can't miss it. And this is kind of a thing that's very difficult for people who don't experience it to wrap your heads around. But for those of you that watch Uncle Bobby, shout out to the Little Chrissy channel. You need to subscribe to Uncle Bobby. Uncle Bobby dropped some content today, and it's short. It's like 17 minutes, but it's great as always. Little Chrissy channel. Go over there and show Uncle Bobby some love. Used to be Gin and Truth on YouTube. So make sure y'all checking out the Lil Chrissy channel. But like he talks about, seeing his father, seeing his grandfather get murdered, essentially. Like it's crazy. So I get it. Like, it's very uncomfortable to deal with bigotry, but you can't sidestep it. You can't dance around it. You can't try to pretend it's not there. And that's what a lot of people are doing, because by you pretending it's not happening, by you being unwilling to say what you're dealing with is bigotry or racism, that is what allows the dog whistles to go unchallenged. Trump can say some shit like, yo, like they're poisoning the blood of our country, because he knows his base, his people want to hear exactly that. And they're like, oh shit, yeah, okay, he's our guy. Let's roll out. It's time for this. It's time for us to reclaim this white supremacy thing. It's really time to let people know this is the white man's land. And then the people who are supposed to be on the other side, the people who are supposed to care about these groups, y'all are so worried that they're gonna say you're mean if you say they're racist. So now you won't call out the racism. So now he could just keep saying they're poisoning the blood of our country. So you're fucking killing us. I get it. The shit is uncomfortable, but people are fucking dying. That's the real result of bigotry, is people's lives get fucked. Okay. And so you got to get over your uncomfortableness to talk about it. It's uncomfortable to live with it. Talking about it ain't shit compared to living with it.
You would think that at a time when economic stratification and marginalization are running rampant, a time where the rich grow richer at the expense of everyone else, politicians would tailor their rhetoric to tackle the real issues at hand and not just stir division amongst races, genders, creeds, and religions. But no, why do figures like Donald Trump point the finger at
PC? I know you ain't worried about offending no goddamn body. PC like me, you don't want to know the real shit? Don't ask. Don't bring it up. Because PC's sure not going to sugarcoat it for us. She's going to tell you just like it is. I appreciate that.
Immigrants as though they are the reason for economic instability and not oligarchs. Will he ever mention the fact that in 2022 alone, undocumented migrants paid nearly $100 billion in tax revenue while being shut out of the very programs they helped fund? Why is the blame for a failing economic model rarely placed on the model itself, but instead transferred to groups who are already having a hard enough time? Why does this economic instability lead to divisive in-group, out-group rhetoric and not toward a productive discussion about the innate instability of the economic model we live under?
Yeah, and I got to tie another thread for y'all. Y'all need to check out Durante Lamar's channel. Durante just dropped a video about basically, did Jesus help poor people or did he exploit them? And man, when he starts breaking that stuff down, I had to bring this up here because I know there's a lot of people who are still struggling to understand, how could a nation where the power structures are still so dominated by Christianity be like this? How could we be a country with this massive wealth inequality, with this where we're supposed to take care of the least of these, but actually we're doing mass deportation? We're supposed to do justice and mercy and due process, but actually people are getting snatched off the street and sent to El Salvador by dudes in hoods. Part of it is you have to understand mythology. That's why it's so important to deal with things in the full light of truth, and to really be critical and to be skeptical. Because if you think that you have an ideology that is supposed to be serving a certain type of person, that's supposed to be helping, that's supposed to be making the world a better place, but in actuality you've been lied to, and that is not really what that ideology is about, then you are believing a myth. And that myth is what allows you to think that you're on the right side of history when you're very clearly on the wrong side of history. So that's why it's so important to deconstruct. I know the ideas you have in your head and what you say about it, but are the things you say true? We cannot lose sight of that importance. Oh my goodness. No You Way sent in a super chat of $2. I appreciate that. Sheba Dog with a big smile on his face. Oh, it's reading the thing to me. It reads like the emojis and the super stickers in text. But I'm checking it out over here on my side monitor. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the super sticker. Thank you so much for the love and support. So glad you're here with us. And hey, Victoria.
Can answer that question by the end of this video. But first, we have to go back in time just a bit. In the aftermath of the Second World War, Western governments and economists alike were scratching their heads trying to come up with economic reforms that would prevent a calamity like the war they just endured from ever occurring again. The Great Depression still lingered in the minds of many, with unregulated capitalism widely seen as its cause and an unstable economic model.
All right, let's remember this. So we're dealing with a Great Depression, but I think because people were really living in it and they were there, they recognized unchecked capitalism is the problem. Let's not lose sight of that. Unchecked capitalism is the problem. It's definitely not the solution.
Governments didn't want to scrap capitalism altogether, but they believed that by guaranteeing their populations basic dignities and social safety nets, it would prevent them from entertaining alternative economic and political ideas. Keep in mind, it was the disillusionment and suffering of the German citizenry post-World War I that allowed for Hitler's rhetoric and ideas to flourish. By preventing that level of economic instability from occurring again, Western governments believed that they could prevent fascism from gaining traction in the future. They also wished to prevent socialist or communist sentiment from strengthening. It's important.
And I don't, and the thing is, like, we still see so much of this. We are still living the results of this demonization of socialism and communism. Again, it's like I talked about, like, just even feeling like I'm new to all this because just living in this country where socialist and communist are literally dirty words. I think that's a huge part of the problem. And to be honest, can anybody remember a time when somebody sat you down, not even sat you down, but like you were going through school and you really got a good introduction to these sort of various systems, and somebody really gave you an honest education in like good readings to understand even the difference between, say, capitalism, socialism, communism, liberalism, conservative? Like, what do these things even mean? I know some of us got an education in those things a lot of times in college, but it really is a shame that there's so much demonization of something that literally most people can't even define and have no clue what it's really all about. $2 super chat from Robin Webster. Thank you so much, Robin. Kristen did TED Talk on intersex. We'll send it. Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds awesome. Yeah. Send that. We'll definitely check that out. Oh, yeah. You want Steph to know about it. Sure. Okay.
Important to note that post-World War II, the socialist bloc was guaranteeing employment, healthcare, and housing to its citizens. If the capitalist West didn't try to appease its populations in a similar way, it feared that revolutionary leftist movements would flourish, and in the eyes of many liberals, fascism and socialism are totally the same level of evil. One for one. And that brings us...
Okay, now this is something that I definitely am feeling. And, you know, even like, this is gonna sound weird, but like, okay, so in America, right, we've got the conservative liberal way we put the spectrum on, and obviously this video will be critiquing liberalism, but in America, like, you know, the liberals are nowhere near the level of absolute evil we get on the right, but still people associate being a Democrat, which is like mostly full of fucking neocons, right? But like being a Democrat is demonized as basically being a socialist and a communist. And absolutely right. Then that is put on the same level as the fascism, and people are more willing to call out the left-leaning behavior than they are even the right-leaning behavior. And so we say things like people hate liberals more than they hate fascists. And I see this all the time, even right fucking now with all of the crazy ass shit that Trump is doing, like all of the wild criminality. Again, this man led an insurrection, fucked up the goddamn pandemic, is a warmonger, says he wants to take Greenland, says he wants to take fucking Canada. Like, I can't, he's been impeached twice. He's a sexual predator, 36 felony convictions. The list goes on and on. People still complain to me about the fucking left. Yeah, I complain about the left too. But that's because we trying to do some fucking interior house cleaning. We try and get our house in order so we can get our fucking game together. I'm talking about people literally complain about the left. Like they literally have more hatred and vitriol. So we say that people hate liberals more than they hate fascists. And it's fucking true. Okay. So you can't even say communism or socialism. They're fucking dirty words. Basically, even being a social democrat's fucking dirty. And people literally put it on a par with fascism. Don't you get sick of the cult-like behavior on both sides? Get out of my face with that shit. I'm not even trying to hear it. Not even trying to hear it. But this is absolutely the case. And I got a fucking newsflash for so many on the audience. If you are a non-believer, you are just as dirty. Because let's be real. What is the left really accused of? Godlessness. What's really the problem with socialists and communists? They were godless, okay? And the atheist regimes that led to the genocide of all the good, innocent believers, okay? So like, for real, like the fact that so many non-believers are still ideologically and politically and socially conservative, I think is just like fucking delusional, like delusional, criminal levels of a lack of self-awareness, really not being able to understand that these motherfuckers hate you. And they literally use the phrase godless as a slur. Why do you think these are the motherfuckers you can negotiate your humanity with? Crazy to me. Crazy. They hate you. I say they demonize socialists and communists. They do, but they literally think non-believers are run by demons. Like it's just, y'all need to wake up.
To this dude, John Maynard Keynes.
Oh,
Keynes was
also, like, love y'all. We can't let them totally kill all our enjoyment this evening. We gotta hit it with the mode. Appreciate y'all for being here. I know y'all getting down. Gotta hit it with the cheers. Yes. Yeah, if you're new here, yeah, we just straight up interrupt the show like that. Yeah, because it's like we kicking it with our friends and we like, hang on, we forgot to put it in the air and kick back our drinks. So we acknowledge one another, we mode, we cheers it up. It's quality time, okay? Let's get back to what we were doing.
Economist who stressed the demand side. To put it very simply, he believed that when people have more money to spend, especially workers who make up most consumers, it drives demand, keeps businesses running, and helps the economy stay healthy. And when that doesn't happen naturally, he argued, the government should step in to boost spending and keep things moving. Think of it as a kinder form of capitalism that Keynes was advocating.
Okay. So I brought up the thing earlier about Christianity and brought up the thing about Durante's content. Go watch Durante Lamar. All right, now, part of what he was talking about is that the religion and the cult this man started actually glorifies sacrifice, especially from the poor. And it never critiques the power structure or advocates for class consciousness or collective action or mutual aid, like nothing. It's always like the mega church pastor who sees a woman like give all her money to the church even though she can't afford to pay rent, and we're like, wow, what a tremendous act of faith. See, we don't think about that. But now translate that to exactly what he just said. Economic instability, poor people are getting fucked over. What are they worried about at the top? Not enough spending. So what do? Do we really actually rebalance power? Do we really redistribute wealth? No, we just make sure the poor people keep fucking spending so the people at the top stay in position. It's right there. It's right there.
Advocating for. One designed to prevent catastrophes like
Hey,
the Great
creation
Depression
myths.
and keep the economically downtrodden
And
from revolting against their
Zaravok, some of y'all just be coming out with some names to just challenge streamers. Like, I think you spend time thinking about how much we're gonna fumble on your screen name and how dumb it's gonna make us look. And if you do, good for you. Good for you. You got a little bit of pettiness in you. I like that.
their governments. After the Second World War in the 40s and 50s, Keynesian economics began to rise to prominence. Western governments embraced Keynes's ideas and enacted policies that built the foundation for what we now call social democracies. They were done with unfettered capitalism and knew that a mixed social
Rena, that's an interesting thing because I don't know because I think you're right in a sense, but it's so hard because I think so many of them are actually conservative. But there is a lot of the conservatives who think they're liberal. So now I don't know if the problem is the actual liberalism, the fake liberalism, or just the fact that most of them are of that certain demographic where they just don't really get what life is like for the rest of us. It's a very interesting conundrum.
democratic type model was the way to not only keep their populations happier, but keep both fascism and socialism at bay. Because again, those two things are totally morally equivalent,
equal.
one for one. Now, I have my
I
issues.
love this. I love this.
Western governments embraced Keynes's ideas and enacted policies that built the foundation for what we now call social democracies. They were done with unfettered capitalism and knew that a mixed social democratic type model was the way to not only keep their populations happier, but keep both fascism and socialism at bay. Because again, those two things are totally morally equivalent, one for one. Now, I have my issues with social democracy. We'll get into that later in this video, but one thing that's for certain is that the social democratic model was an improvement to the unregulated capitalist hellscape that preceded it.
Okay, now see that's and this is something that, you know, in my own liberalism that I'm definitely guilty of. I'm definitely guilty of politics by the lesser of two evils. And even now, like, you know, I tend to vote for liberal Democrats because again, the social democracy that we're not even really doing, and most of them are not really on the side of, right? Like to be real with y'all, like if you think about it, our social democrats are considered extremist. Like we just had Cory Booker break the record for the longest filibuster in the history of the Senate, and people consider him to be super leftist. Homie's not a leftist. Homie's a Democrat. He's my mentor, but I'm gonna keep it real with y'all. The man's power is the gift of gab and his incredible fundraising ability and his ability to get like people to donate, and like he's really good at what he does, but not a leftist, like very, very, very much part of the Democratic base, and it's power structure, okay? And then we have people that are considered so, like we would say, like, because I'm not saying that the man doesn't have good ideas. What I'm saying is the man is considered a mainstream Democrat and not that far left. And the people we would actually like call social democrats, like he might be in the conversation, but most of us would put like AOC and Bernie Sanders in that category. Again, they're considered way extreme left, and like there's not that many. Like, who is there? There's like the Squad, Bernie, maybe like Jasmine Crockett, but again, like I don't even think she'd call herself that, because again, most of these people need to stay within the good graces of the mainstream Democratic structure. Even Bernie Sanders, right? And that's how you end up with stuff like so many of the Democrats being supported by let's just say people who are very pro-Israel. And so what I'm saying is, like, we don't even really get social democracy here. Like, we're not that lucky. But at the same time, we're forced to go with anything that looks like it, or at least a lot of us feel like we have to go with anything that even looks more like it, because again, it's so much better than the unfettered capitalist hellscape that the elephant people want to bring upon us. And it really does suck. And to be honest, I hate this country and I want to leave. So I don't know how to solve it. I don't know what to do. Like, we have this bullshit two-party system. They're both terrible. I literally wish I lived somewhere else. That's all I got for you.
As the Western world continued to embrace...
The Mikey famine said Cory Booker stole my girl. I'll never forgive him. Oh, man. Oh, man. Literally, he's like my mentor. We're like family. I'll probably never say anything bad about him. I'll tell you guys a funny story. I told my students, since he's in the news today, I'll give you guys my favorite Cory Booker story. He literally, when he first became mayor in Newark, New Jersey, he literally tackled the bank robber outside of Seton Hall. Sorry, outside of Seton Hall. Listen to me. Outside of City Hall, and was like, "Not in my city," right? Like, and literally like had to be told by his law department to like stop putting his life in danger to like save people. He like literally has like movie superhero instincts as a politician. It's taken him very far, but they're literally stories of him like running into burning buildings to save people, and us in City Hall being like, yeah, I don't think we want the mayor running into burning buildings to save people. We have a fire department for that. So he's really like that. He's actually really like that. So what he did today was impressive. I was really happy to wake up to it, but he's the man for the job. He has the rhetoric. He has he was a All-American linebacker. He played at Stanford. So he has the physicality, even, and that's always been part of his leadership. Even when he was the mayor of Newark, he was known for running the city, like just running around. Like, so he's athletic. He literally has the physical endurance and stuff. So today we were feeling it. Today, all the Cory Booker people, we were kind of like, we've been telling y'all about this guy. We've been telling y'all he really needs to be in that conversation. And today he made a lot of us look like we're betting on the right horse. But of course, then I'm going to do a stream after that talks about how we're doing the liberalism, the fascism pipeline, and all the Democrats are actually kind of fucked. So whatever, life is complicated.
Keynesian economics and shift toward social democracies, there was a very notable man who was just not fucking with it. This guy, Friedrich Hayek. Hayek was an Austrian economist who believed that an overemphasis on collectivism would fast-track a society to totalitarianism. He believed that social democracy and expansive welfare states would erode the individual and eventually morph into authoritarianism. In 1944, Hayek published a book called The Road to Serfdom, in which he made his argument, and
all right, pause the tape. Lena, I don't know how you got censored by the bot. I'm seeing that you're not a mod. I literally don't understand how you're one of the people I'm closest to on the fucking planet. Like literally one of my best friends, and you're not a mod on this channel. Lena, what are we how are you not a mod? You're like a managing mod now. You can mod other mods. Lena, I'm sorry. I literally had no idea you weren't a mod. Did you ask to not be a mod or something? It doesn't even make any sense to me. Lena's now a super mod.
Not take long before this book of his was picked up by business communities and wealthy, powerful people who saw his ideas as a way to champion a reversal of the Keynesian era. While Keynesian economics improved financial stability for the average person, the ultra-rich resented it because it limited their ability to maximize profits. The business communities and the ultra-rich saw in Hayek's ideas a chance to reverse labor protections, taxes, regulations, and usher the world back into an era where unfettered capitalism ruled supreme. An era where they could grow their wealth exponentially without having to worry about who or what they exploited.
But all right, so this is something me and my students have been talking about, which is like thinking of like a multi-level selection. Man, I've been thinking about doing like a bigger stream on these things. Maybe I'll get into it. There's a book we're reading by David Sloan Wilson. It's called This View of Life. I highly recommend it. And what he basically talks about, to put it in a nutshell, is sort of the principles you need to understand group selection and how, instead of thinking about natural selection always as operating on individuals and therefore, being all about competition and rugged individualism and all this type of nonsense, which also the people who were really into that supported laissez-faire politics and economic practices, versus understanding that actually the small group is probably the best level of analysis for human populations, or really any sort of species that's as social as we are. And when you reframe or restructure literally the environment so that we're selecting for the best groups rather than the best individuals, you select for cooperation and like egalitarianism. And the best example he uses is this example of chickens, right? And so there's think of this as two side-by-side kind of experiments in egg production with chickens. And in the first experiment, what they do is they select for the individual chickens that produce the most eggs. So we look at the cage full of chickens, whichever one produces the most eggs, that's how we decide who gets to carry on and basically be in the next generation. And in the other setup, we select for the group of chickens, in other words, the whole pen of chickens, the whole, whoever's in the same air unit, we select for the pen that produces the most eggs. So in one, we're selecting for individuals. In the second, we're selecting for the group. Okay. And after just a few generations, okay, what they found was, in the one where they selected for individual chickens, they actually had lower productivity. And what happened was the chickens that produced the most eggs were the most aggressive chickens. So they were selecting for aggression. And so the individual chickens, like, they were actually not producing a lot. And they were spending most of their time like fighting, and these chickens look awful. Like, all their feathers are gone. They're literally like down to their skeletons. Like when you look at them, like, you get physically uncomfortable. And it's because they spend all their time fighting, pecking each other's feathers out, and it's really crappy. And the other one where they were selecting for the group of chickens that produces the most, all the chickens are healthy, happy, they're nice to each other, they're cooperating, and it's like a happy society, okay? And so the idea is that we're supposed to be switching the unit of our analysis from the individual to the group. And you see this happening with the lies we've been taught about the fucking economy, that really the way to the best society is for people to just do what's in their best interest, no interference from the government, maximize profit. Your value is how much money you make, and the more competitive you can be and put other people out of business, the better. And now me and my students are just sitting there looking at the world like, holy shit, we are living in the hellscape of the chickens in the first group that have all their feathers pecked out. And we are literally living through that. We are literally living in the society where we selected for billionaires who have more wealth amongst literally 2 or 3 of them than half the fucking population. Most of us are living paycheck to paycheck if we're fucking lucky enough to still have paychecks. Okay, and it's utterly crazy, and this is what is happening. We have built our whole political and economic system on thinking about what's best for the individual. Well, what's best for the goose is best for the gander. Yeah, turns out that's a bunch of horseshit. And again, mythology. All of the things we tell ourselves about our economy, about what's mythology. And this is why it's so important we teach people the truth. Because a comforting lie ends up screwing us over a hell of a lot more.
The world of an ideology that is objectively dog shit just because it would be friendly to the rich and powerful wasn't easy. This was going to take a lot of money and resources, so rich, moneyed interests immediately got to work promoting Hayek's book. DeWitt Wallace, the anti-communist editor and founder of Reader's Digest, published a condensed version of Hayek's book in an attempt to make his ideas more digestible for casual readers. 1 million reprints were ordered, many of which were at the requests of companies trying to indoctrinate their workers. Look magazine adapted Hayek's book into a cartoon which was distributed by General Motors to its workers, and Hayek was being booked for well-paying speaking gigs in America so his ideas could be propagated further. In 1947...
So propaganda and evangelism. That's how we got here, y'all.
Hayek went on to found the Mont Pelerin Society, which was an organization where he and other like-minded individuals went on to promote his
good
theories.
Good question, X. I think in many ways those are interconnected struggles, and I think part of, again, the mythology is that we've been taught we can compartmentalize these things, that we've been taught. I have so evolutionary psychology, right? One of the evolutionary psychology is actually fucking phenomenal, but it still has a very controversial reputation, and some of that is just people not wanting to think about psychology through an evolutionary lens and framework, which I think is inescapable and unavoidable and has to happen. And some of it is just idiosyncrasies of the sort of history of the field. So, for instance, adaptationist thinking, where we try to explain every single behavior or every single trait of an organism through the lens of how it is adaptive in that organism's environment, when some things are just a consequence of history or chance, right? And so that kind of hurt evolutionary psychology because they were trying to say a lot of things were adaptive, and maybe people weren't trying to hear that, whether they were right or wrong is sort of a different conversation. And then also they had ideas like thinking of the brain as having highly evolved modules. And while we certainly do see some discrete phenomenon and certain aspects of our sensory system or our cognitive system do are hardwired to particular parts of our brain or activate certain regions. A lot of scholars have been highly impressed and surprised by just how much stimulates sort of whole brain activity, or thinking all over the world, or thinking all over, or just, you know, activity. I should say activity throughout the brain. Nevertheless, I think part of that legacy is thinking about our life as compartmentalized modules, right? That there's like a module in, like, somewhere in my brain when I think about politics, that's like maybe something, and then I think about religion, and maybe there's something over here, and then I think about economics, right? And so, and then we can like define ourselves in all these different ways. Like, I'm a liberal Muslim who's also in favor of socialist economic policies, right? Because we, you know, and that is meaningful. I'm not saying that that's not meaningful, but I do think that we over compartmentalize and think of these things as separate, when in reality, your worldview or your ideology can't help but affect your political stance, which can't help but influence where you're at in economic thinking. And so when I see, for instance, I'm thinking of class solidarity, and I'm thinking of, you know, like rich versus poor. You know, we we talk about eat the rich, but I'm like, we don't even really got to eat them. We just need to really make them pay their fair share of taxes, show some class solidarity, and be committed to the redistribution of wealth. I don't think we can do that without migrating far and fast away from the fascist, unmitigated capitalist hellscape that the right is trying to impose on us. And to be honest, not without a similar rejection of neoliberalism and what we currently accept as the politics of the left. But I think we certainly have to move left. We need to move. I'm saying we need to really move left of the left. But yeah, I think that's, I know it's just a quick comment, left versus right or rich versus poor, but I really think that that's a thing people really do need to reflect on. Because like right now, I don't understand how most conservatives are watching what is happening, which is a system that clearly only favors the rich, and like they're good with it. Like, I don't, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Free market, deregulated capitalism. The ideas propagated by Hayek and his organization have come to be referred to as neoliberalism, and this doctrine of his was financially backed by some of the richest, most powerful interests on Earth. Forces such as the Koch brothers, William Volcker & Co., General Electric, DuPont, and many, many more. They saw in Hayek's neoliberalism a way to liberate themselves from the regulations and responsibilities that Keynesianism imposed on them. Now, neoliberalism as a term in the modern day tends to be used mostly as a pejorative by people critical of the ideology, but it absolutely still is a real and pervasive parasitic force. To define it can be tricky, but here are a few attempts that I think do a good job. Historian David Harvey says, neoliberalism is a theory of political economic practices that proposes that human well-being can best be advanced by liberating individual entrepreneurial freedoms and skills within an institutional framework characterized by strong private property rights. The role of the state is to create and preserve an institutional framework appropriate to such practices. The state has to guarantee, by force if need be, the proper functioning of markets. If markets do not exist in areas such as land, water, education, healthcare, social security, or environmental pollution, then they must be created by state action if necessary. But beyond these tasks, the state should not venture. Deregulation, privatization, and withdrawal of the state from many areas of social provision have been all too common. George Monbiot and Peter Hutchison define neoliberalism as an ideology whose central belief is that competition is the defining feature of humankind. It tells us that we are greedy and selfish, but that greed and selfishness light the path to social improvement, generating the wealth that will eventually enrich us all. It casts us as consumers rather than citizens. It seeks to persuade us that our well-being is best realized not through political choice, but through economic choice, specifically buying and selling. It promises us that by buying and selling, we can discover a natural meritocratic hierarchy of winners and losers. The market, it contends, will, if left to its own devices, determine who deserves to succeed and who does not. The talented and hardworking will prevail, whereas the feckless, weak, and incompetent will fail. The wealth the winners generate will trickle down to enrich the rest. Neoliberals argue that an active state seeking to change social outcomes through public spending and social programs rewards failure, fuels dependency, and subsidizes the losers. The role of governments, neoliberals claim, should be to eliminate the obstacles that prevent the discovery of the natural hierarchy. Put very
All right, so hopefully y'all are catching the vibes now, right? Like, yeah, we're living in that first group of chickens, y'all, and it sucks. And it absolutely sucks. And also you're seeing the problem with our lack of education. Neoliberalism isn't liberal. So you got to have a bit of an education to understand, because we would consider most of this essentially conservative, pro-capitalist policy. Now, the other thing that makes this a bit weird is a lot of us would consider, for instance, if you're in America and you're thinking about the left, the Democrats, neoliberals. But in their neoliberalism, they're not being liberal. And that's why those of us who are leftist a lot of times are discontented with the quote unquote liberal party, because they're so much neoliberalism. To us, they're really conservatives. And that's how the whole ass Overton window has shifted in the direction of fascism. So we have fascism strong and heavy on one side and fascism light on the other. And we certainly have a lot of people on the right who are neocons. In other words, they're doing a whole new alt-right fascism, more fascist, more right-wing than the Tea Party, more warmongering than a George Bush wet dream, right? And more racism and bigotry than fucking Reagan and Nixon sitting there like, damn, we ain't even think we could get away. Damn, Nixon rolling over his grave like, God damn, maybe I underachieved, because Trump taking this shit to a whole new level. Okay, so the neocons are way over there. So then by contrast, if you just like say black people instead of DEI hire or something, like you're automatically considered a liberal. But in here, at best, you're probably a neoliberal, which is really some conservative bullshit. So we all types of fucked up, yo.
Very simply, neoliberalism is the ideology that clears the way for unfettered capitalism to rule supreme. As you can probably tell, this is the perfect ideology for the ultra-rich
like
to get behind,
yeah,
because not only does it frame financial success
nonsense
as purely meritocratic, but it also paints monetary gain as some sort of moral accomplishment that the state should by no means interfere with.
And I'm sorry, but like, come on, y'all. As much as I hate Elon Musk, he needs to be the face of this whole situation. And all I'm gonna say is, this is the best y'all could do, because his whole existence undermines any notion of meritocracy, the market settling on what's best for everybody and rewarding the no. I'm gonna just say Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a draft dodging loser who we all know got through school cheating, has never really been intelligent about much of anything. And both these men were rich and come from terrible, horrible racist legacies. and just failed upwards because they started with wealth and resources the rest of us could never imagine. Now, if you're the type of conservative who's behind these people and supporting them, again, you are playing yourself. Because if this is the face of your meritocracy, whatever, dude.
Sort of moral accomplishment that the state should by no means interfere with, even if that gain is achieved through exploitation or injustice. It treats the market as a wholly infallible force that rewards the strong and worthy, while ignoring the fact that markets are indifferent to human suffering. Since this market fundamentalism—
Yo, rich people are just the people who are best at pecking out the feathers of other chickens. That's essentially the fucking world we live in.
Is a key component of the ideology. Markets are often forced into sectors where they shouldn't be. This ideology, in an almost Calvinist sense, allows for the rich and powerful to reframe their opulence and greed as moral and just. It allows corporate interests to ignore those pesky market externalities, to forget about the pollution and exploitation their operations create, because if the free market rewards them with riches, then they must be on the right path. No wonder the ruling class jumped at the opportunity to push Hayek's ideas. But again, they were faced with the obstacle of democracy. Neoliberalism, to most normal people, is not a very enticing ideology, and they sure as shit wouldn't vote for it if they knew what it was, despite the millions of dollars.
Now, that's another thing that's like so interesting. Again, just the mythology, just the things that we've been sold. But that if we were really let in on what it actually is, like nobody wants this. Like, and this is something I've always felt about just the whole capitalist model and our whole economic system. It sucks. And it really suffers from a lack of imagination. Like, your vision is fucking terrible. Again, y'all, I'm gonna just tell y'all what I really am convinced of, and that's there's enough resources to go around. There's enough resources that, again, we could live in a nation with free healthcare, free education, free childcare, free access to business incubators if you really want to do a thing like that. I don't even know why you would, because there's a national universal basic income that guarantees everybody essentially a productive, safe, harmonious middle-class lifestyle, even to people who are just totally, completely born incapable. Because you know what? Some people are born totally incapable due to no fault of their own. But instead, we like live in this world where instead, like, people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to not have enough money, while billionaires have more money than half the society put together. Like, whose idea is this? Whose vision is? Your vision sucks. Like, we don't do enough to tell these business people, these thought leaders, all these people who are running around trying to hustle and make a buck. Like, yo, your vision sucks. Like, you seriously lack creativity, and your actual vision is fucking terrible.
Dollars that went into promoting the ideas.
This is why the
Hayek
GOP loves the prosperity gospel.
Keynesian economics remained as the mainstream economic consensus, but that was soon to change.
All right, now we get to how liberalism turns to fascism.
That it would be hard to implement their policies domestically without first testing them out abroad. And the country that they set their sights on was Chile. Throughout the Cold War, the US government was very involved in Chile. They did not want it to turn communist, and they did everything they could to exert economic and political influence over it. The US even brought Chilean university students to America to study economics at the University of Chicago because it had a reputation for being anti-left. This operation came to be known as the Chile Project, and as author Naomi Klein put it, the goal of the Chile Project was to produce ideological warriors who would win the battle of ideas against Latin America's pink economists. As this battle was taking place on the ideological front, Chile, in 1970,
Hey,
had elected
Carrie.
a socialist leader, which was not gonna fly with the Americans. The US spent millions of dollars and used every available resource to destabilize Chile and create the conditions for a coup. They wanted that pesky leftist out so they could replace him with someone else and test out neoliberalism. In 1973, that wish came true. Chile's Marxist president was overthrown and replaced by a military junta, which eventually consolidated under the rule of Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet was a brutal dictator whose fascistic regime was marked by mass murder, torture, sexual violence, kidnappings, and the persecution of leftists. He rid the country of any socialist or Marxist influence, and in the eyes of the Americans, he was the perfect man to implement neoliberalism in Chile.
Oh, it was terrible, but like for some reason we need to do it again because it just speaks to the moment.
Consolidated under the rule of Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet was a brutal dictator whose fascistic regime was marked by mass murder, torture, sexual violence, kidnappings, and the persecution of leftists. He rid the country of any socialist or Marxist influence, and in the eyes of the Americans, he was the perfect man to implement neoliberalism in Chile. Those same students who studied economics at the University of Chicago were now fully equipped to return home and put their lessons of mass privatization, deregulation, and market fundamentalism into practice. University of Chicago professor Milton Friedman played a key role in indoctrinating these young men, and he was also a prominent member of Hayek's Mont Pelerin Society. Remember that? As the years passed under Pinochet's brutal dictatorship, Chile's wealthy elite thrived, along with American corporations which were free to exploit Chilean resources without the threat of nationalization or government regulation. Pinochet allowed them to operate without restrictions, and if the Chilean population had a problem with that, he would kill or torture them into compliance. Nothing was to get in the way of the almighty invisible hand of the free market.
And this again, like, just the brutality of all of it. And again, like the show of force that reveals the clear emptiness of the promise. When you have to force a population into compliance, especially halfway across the goddamn globe, because you damn sure wouldn't show your ass like that at home. Only so you could justify showing your ass like that at home. Man, it really just shows you, like, again, like I said, these people lack vision. You only have to do this because your ideas are so bad you can't convince people of them. If you had good ideas, you wouldn't have to bring an army and a military and force me at gunpoint to do things. If you had good ideas, you would just be like, wouldn't it be great if we ran the economy like this? And I sit back and I think about it and be like, damn, you got a good point there. Yeah, maybe I like your idea. Your idea is good. Let's go with your idea. So please, like, don't forget this. You know who this reminds me of? This reminds me of Bar. Shout out to Bar, Black Atheist Rants. Definitely check out my man Bar. One of the things I love what Bar says is he's like, why are we talking about is Christianity true? Why are we talking about is this thing true? He said they forced this upon our ancestors when they stole them to make them their slaves. And now we're going to sit around and talk about, well, is this true or not? I think if this was true, they probably wouldn't have had to force our ancestors to believe it as they made them their slaves. Once you do that, you kind of revealing maybe your arguments aren't that convincing. Maybe your arguments aren't really that good. So I know this never really gets put to the oppressor class. I know nobody ever dares to speak truth to power, and who knows? I'm only doing so on a small YouTube channel, mostly talking to my friends. But we need to let these people know we see your show of force. We see your inclination to dominate. And the fact that this is how you go about your business tells us you don't have good ideas. So you want to really make us think that you know what's going on up here? Maybe switch up your MO. At least pretend to have enough confidence in your ideas to think they might actually convince somebody.
Friedrich Hayek even had this to say about Pinochet's Chile. My personal preference leans toward a liberal dictatorship rather than toward a democratic government devoid of liberalism. Need I remind you, this fucking guy built his entire career by fear-mongering about how welfare programs were a slippery slope to tyranny. But as soon as he was faced with a tyrannical despot who just so happened to promote his economics, suddenly all that talk about freedom and liberty wasn't so convenient, and he didn't mind a dictatorship all too much, as long as it was, quote, a liberal one. Unlike the corporatist blend of state and business seen in fascist regimes of old, such as Mussolini's Italy, Pinochet's regime maintained the hyper-militaristic, ultra-nationalist authoritarianism intrinsic to fascism, but repurposed the state to clear the way for corporate dominance. This model has laid the groundwork for what some have referred to as neoliberal fascism. Which brings me to one of the main points of this video. Free market economics and fascistic regimes are not mutually exclusive. As we can see, fascistic despots like Pinochet were propped up solely to protect capital, exploit labor, and enforce what Hayek would call liberalism. By that point, Hayek had distanced himself from the term neoliberalism due to its negative connotations and just went with liberalism.
And see now, and this is still a lot of the legacy we deal with, is people really not being able. Like I said, y'all, I'm new to this, so I'm not even throwing shade so much as I'm just trying to tell y'all what I think is the reality, which is we don't even know what these terms mean largely, and then the language trips us up, where people think, for instance, again, that neoliberalism is actually liberal. And this contributes to the problem, right? Because then you have people who shift. They go, "Oh, neoliberalism's now become a dirty word, so I'm gonna just call myself liberal." Well, you're still doing neoliberalism. So now when I come along, God damn it, I keep dropping my vape and then like needing to wipe it off. Oh, at least I have my thing here already. All right, cool. And then when people come along and say, okay, I'm a liberal, or, you know, I support liberal ideas, a lot of times people don't know the difference between what we would call genuine progressive or liberal or leftist leaning ideals versus what's been labeled as liberal or left, due to, again, the tendency of fascistic movements to use language to kind of cloak their true intention. So a great example being the term socialist and communist, and how oftentimes the regimes that people say, oh, look at this brutal communist regime or this brutal socialist regime. If you look at the regime, it was a fascistic regime, it was fucking fascist, and not really socialist or not really communist, but using the name like National Socialist, right? And so now socialism gets a bad name, even though the thing people associate with socialism isn't actually socialist. And to me, this is again, like, you just got to get sharper, and part of why the whole Overton window has moved so far to the right, because I think in people's heads we see a spectrum between neocons and maybe neo-libs, and in reality both of these are dogmatically fucking capitalist fascistic hellscapes, right? Like, you don't want to be a part of either one, right? But again, it does contribute maybe to some people buying into the idea that there's really sort of extreme behavior. It leads to the both sides of it, right? Instead of people realizing how much the whole spectrum has shifted and is now on only really one side of the dividing line, this contributes to people thinking there's actual leftists in power who are also, you know, doing a fascism. And I hate it. It's fucking bullshit. And again, I'm not gonna let somebody say that shit to me, but I somewhat understand where some of that misunderstanding comes from.
More classical liberal.
All right, hang on. Let me get Stephanie's comment in real quick. It is worth recalling that Chile is a major supplier of copper, and that at the time AT&T was a monopoly company whose business was dependent on cheap copper wire, and their money paid for the coup. Yeah, Steph, that's like something I wasn't even thinking of overall, which is sort of the bigger story about how so many of the power players in our current economy have these sort of super dark histories that we have not come to reckon with, because we see the success of corporations as so integral to our economy. That's a real problem. But of course, our conversation being enhanced by our resident history major. Thanks, Steph.
So now that the Chile project was complete and neoliberalism was proven to treat the ruling class quite well, it was time to bring it home to the West in the forms of Reaganism in the US and Thatcherism in the UK. I should note that neoliberal policies did technically start up under Carter, which is why some people say Reaganism came before Reagan, but it wasn't until Ronald came around that the full ferocity of neoliberalism would be unleashed in the US. I think we all know what Reaganism is: the heavy emphasis on supply-side economics, mass privatizations, deregulations, attacks on labor protections, and the whole neoliberal 9 yards. A similar set of policies was enacted in Britain under Thatcher when she privatized the railways and other public utilities, implemented the poll tax, sold off public housing to private interests, privatized the prison system, and so on. These economic reforms by
like big yikes. Like it's hard for me to not feel a certain unsettling in my bones. Like when I was just looking at Reagan, I like evil. When I was looking at Thatcher, there was like there's something in this like look. Of course, he's not going to pick a flattering picture of her, but like there's just something about the whole vibe of the brutality and cruelness of these people, but the ease with which they wore the skin of an actual human being. And because these people don't purport just to be human. They purport to be superior humans, morally superior humans, examples. And then the thing that really gets you is when you see their followers, when you see their supporters, when you see the people who, cry over them or kiss their screens when they see him and things like that. It's something that we all have to try to keep ourselves in check about. One of the things that was nice today was part of Corey's speech was actually confessing to his own shortcomings and the shortcomings of the party and things like that. And obviously we're going to need to see a lot from them. People are not happy with the situation we find ourselves in, but it was definitely refreshing, at least to see the concession. And as a Cory Booker supporter, it felt nice because like we've always had disagreements about policies or issues, but it allowed you to say, okay, at least he knows. Whereas like there's the airs that so many of them put on. It's like never admit you made a mistake, never say you're sorry, and then the policies that they pursued just so brutally. You're like, oh my goodness, how did these people just smile and have tea and all of this shit? It's just, it really does, like, it's scary. I'm just put it that way. It's like genuine scary. Like these figures frighten me, and it frightens me because, damn, like it really shows part of we're animals, y'all, and I gotta admit, not very impressive ones. I think a huge part of our problem is humans are way too impressed with ourselves, right? Everybody that wants to, whoa, we're so great and we're brilliant and we figured out medicine and the internet. Like, nah, most of us had nothing to do with that shit. But also it's 2025 and we still drop bombs on each other. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, sometimes we got a little bit of brilliance, but we're still monkeys throwing around shit in the jungle. because it's just crazy how fucking uncivilized we actually can be and how ruthless we are. But part of that is our tribalism and the need to stay in with the in group and the need to not be alienated, ostracized, or face social consequences. And so the concession to people in power that was integral to the functioning of human groups. And that's again another shift when thinking about this whole evolutionary perspective and multi-level selection and how to select for cooperative groups. A big part of that is shifting from hierarchical systems where people are so afraid to speak out or speak up or protest because there's such a huge power difference, to more autonomous small groups and where, you know, people are peers, and if people do have, you know, slightly more privilege or slightly more resources or slightly more status, it's matched with the responsibility that comes with it. So yeah, okay, you know, coach gets to call the plays, but you know, coach has responsibilities for everybody that we don't have as individual players, right? That type of deal. But when it starts to get to like such a huge level where it's like a evil queen walks into a room, or like an evil leader or king or president or something, and everybody knows they're like doing a genocide, and you know, we're all like, doop, doop, good evening. You know, it's crazy that power kind of crushes us into submission, and we lose our ability sometimes to even speak up about what's right and wrong just because the person we're dealing with is so powerful. And that scares me.
Interests, privatize the prison system, and so on. These economic reforms, by prioritizing the business communities and the rich, we were told, would deliver a tide that would lift all boats. But in reality, to quote David Harvey, neither Britain nor the US achieved high levels of economic performance in the 80s, suggesting that neoliberalism was not the answer to the capitalists' prayers. To be sure, inflation was brought down and interest rates fell, but this was all purchased at the expense of high rates of unemployment, averaging 7.5% in the US during the Reagan years, and more than 10% in Thatcher's Britain. Cutbacks in state welfare and infrastructural expenditures diminished the quality of life for many. The overall result was an awkward mix of low growth and increasing income inequality. But none of that actually mattered, because the real goal in both instances was to facilitate the transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top. The relentless privatizations and the creation of markets any and everywhere did the trick. One aspect of this neoliberal transformation that often gets ignored is the think tanks funded by dark money that actually come up with these policies that then get handed to governments. To quote Monbiot and Hutchison, we've discovered that the Koch brothers, two of the richest people in human history, developed an entire network of think tanks to lobby for extreme neoliberalism.
And that's crazy too. Like, one thing I mentioned, okay, so last night we also kicked off a new nonprofit, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Lord Jesus, y'all gonna think this weird, but you'll understand in a minute. Lord Jesus, non-believers who are trying to form nonprofits and social organizations are really having a hard time right now. So if you're up there, if you could just show a little favor to I don't know what else to do, y'all. I don't know what else to do, because now when you tell me we starting a new secular nonprofit, I'm ready to be like, oh no, here we go again. But this one's called Secular Rising, and it's the man Secular Rarity starting it. And y'all know I love me some SR, and that's a good dude. So we in. And he kicked it off last night with a big, huge marathon. So check out Secular Rising, and I'm hoping this nonprofit. I hope it has all the success in the world. And if there is somebody who I certainly would sign up to follow their leadership on these things. You know, as far as I know, man, SR is would be really high on that list. I really love that dude. So he asked me to do it. I'm in. I do anything that dude asked me to do because he's cool and he shows up for people. And I got to kick it with Seth Andrews and Cam in the green room, and we had a lot of fun. And then I was on air for 15 minutes with Cross Examine, and I loved it. I don't know, y'all. I've done a bunch of these different like marathon streams and different things where you like show up for a little bit or whatever. I gotta admit, like something about that 15 minutes was cool because it doesn't throw off your whole day, your whole evening, and you just show up and you just jump right in, you just jump right into whatever you want to talk about and get out of it. So it's a different challenge, but I have fun with it. Anyway, one of the things I was talking about was just how much when we look at what's going on in our community, like law, when we look at science, these things are supposed to be things we can all share in because they are tools of the common public. And so when you go to base your laws on your particular beliefs or say that science is consistent with your beliefs or affirms your belief, you are fundamentally misguided from the beginning. Fundamentally misguided from the beginning. So yeah, all right, I'm gonna keep rolling so I'm not rambling.
Reagan's case, the mandate for leadership was a 3,000-page document written by the to quote Monbiot and Hutchison, the mandate for leadership was
I remember what I was gonna say. All right, and so one of the things I talked about with Cross-Examine was if you go back, the study of things like science and law, the very foundations of our economic system, in my understanding, is liberal, right? Like the purpose of universities were to have a liberal purpose, right? The idea was to educate the people, right? So that the people could provide opportunities for themselves. It was inherently something of saying, hey, people are like not rich and powerful, and we need to like give the not rich and powerful people an education so they can create opportunities for themselves. That was an inherently liberal mission. So to me, the reason we even teach science or teach law has a liberal purpose to it. And I say it, I'm just speaking for myself, y'all. Y'all could disagree, but then I'm gonna just ask you why they call them liberal arts universities. And that's just a liberal arts university. The other ones are the state schools. And if you go look at why their charters and why they were founded and the land grants, why. All right, now we could talk about land grabs. Yes, the land grants have a whole fucked up history of being on stolen land, and the whole thing is gross. But if you really look at the liberal arts colleges, you look at land grant universities, okay, maybe not your Harvards or whatever, but those type of universities, most universities, that's a liberal foundation that they have. Where am I going with this? What the fuck is going on in the world with a conservative think tank? What the fuck is going on in the world when it's like, let's put a bunch of PhDs in a room together so they can think about how to fuck people over together? Like, that shit is crazy to me because it's kind of like a doctor who kills people, right? Like it's something wrong because you think all doctors, like the very foundation of teaching people medicine is to make them people who will help heal people and help people who have medical situations. If I told you like a doctor was running around choking people, you'd be like, what? I don't understand. Or like, yeah, there's this hospital you go to, but they don't help you. They just like push you out the window. You'd be like, what the fuck? Like, right? Like there's just something fundamentally broken that you have not delivered on the promise of why we educated you, right? And that's how I feel when people tell me like PhDs are doing some crazy shit, or there's like an institution and it does quote unquote research and that research harms people. I'm sitting around like, what? Like what? Like no, that shouldn't be possible. Like it should. I think it should be illegal. Like there's a certain level of opportunity and prestige and status that comes with this type of background, this type of training, this type of education, and it's supposed to be for a reason. Because again, training people like you in this discipline will help make the world a better place. So that's why we grant you that status and privilege. And to me, you are betraying that when you're a scholar who supports policies that hurt people. Like you're like broken, return to the factory, strip them of their stuff. Cause they just fucked it all the way up.
3,000-page document written by the Heritage Foundation, the same force behind today's Project
get them together for better reasons.
That was given to Reagan and
say.
entailed thousands of policy prescriptions that ranged from mass privatizations, the scaling back of welfare programs, massive tax cuts for the rich, and so on. We begin to see how this ideology, heavily funded by the ultra-rich, serves the ultra-rich without any concern for democracy. The more governments deregulate, privatize, and implement neoliberal policies, the richer the ruling class becomes, and the more they can exert their influence over politicians and governments. In capitalist democracies, money serves as voting power. The more of it you have, the more of the vote share you effectively control. Neoliberalism seeks to break the chains that restrict unfettered capitalism, and as a result, it breeds plutocrats and oligarchs, not democracy. It's very easy to point the finger at Reagan and Thatcher, but the idea that it started and stopped with them distracts us from the fact that the same plutocratic forces behind their administrations are still around today, and they don't just back conservatives or Republicans.
There you go.
Everyone is a neoliberal now. Some of the most grotesque displays of neoliberalism often come from Democrats, Canadian Liberals, UK Labour, and similar parties. From Bill Clinton's repeal of FDR's Glass-Steagall Act, legislation designed to regulate the financial sector, the revocation of which played a role in the 2008 financial crash, to Tony Blair taking a neoliberal hatchet to the UK's beloved National Health Service, these displays of neoliberalism should not go unmentioned.
Yeah, and honestly, it's also us, it's also the cultural climate. It's always the electorate. Again, I always remind myself, I'm certainly willing to confront my enemies. And I do see my life, unfortunately, as having a lot of enemies. There's a lot of people who, if they got their way, wouldn't be very good for me, and that's enough right there. But I remember that if they wanted what I wanted, if they shared my values, if we got on the same page about a common goal, which I do not know, don't give me that be nice, reach across the aisle bullshit, because that's not what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm talking about looking them in the motherfucking face, telling them they fucking wrong, calling them out for their bullshit, and then telling them if you want to get it right, your ass need to fucking change. No, I'm not gonna come meet you where you're at. You're gonna fucking do what the fucking right thing is. Sorry, sometimes there's right and wrong. We're right. We're telling the truth. Y'all are fucked up. You need to change. That's the bottom line. Okay, so don't hit me with that. I'm not hitting y'all with that bullshit. But if they did that, if we could really fight it out, and then they did that, man, we could turn this motherfucker out, right? We could make the world a better place. And so where I'm going with this is, I think a lot of the reason this happens, and a lot of the reason our whole world is stuck in a shit sandwich between neocons and neolibs, is because there's a certain amount of like collective energy you need to be electable to any position of power beyond dog catcher. And to do that, you've got to do what George Bush used to call Bush and Clinton were kind of known for, which is triangulating, right? Which is, if you're a Democratic candidate, you can't be so repulsive to conservatives. So to try to win over more conservatives and the conservative part of your base, you adopt a bunch of conservative bullshit because you're trying to appeal to those people. And that's why it's such a huge problem, because so much of how we end up with these dumbass policies is just they appeal to people who don't know better. The vote of a dumbass is just as good as the vote of a genius, and turns out there's a whole lot more dumbasses than geniuses. So let them have cake, right? Give the dumbasses what they want and stay in power, versus do what's brilliant and be completely unelectable. And that's the real challenge that has to be shifted. And unfortunately, I think it kind of does have to, in some ways. I don't want to say start from the bottom up, because I think people in power are responsible and not being held accountable the way they need to, and they're certainly fucking it up. But also a groundswell, a better education to create an electorate who is more aware and educated would effectively create demand, right? Where the consumer of the policies, the base, is a more educated consumer and therefore has better demands. All right. And this kind of goes back to what Steph was saying about the real trick wasn't so much creating a system where it was okay for a few people to have so much and so many people to have so little. The real magic was convincing the people who had so little that they could have so much, if not for the other people who had so little, right? And by doing that, they could, again, convince them to demand the policies that would continue to support the inequities. And that's the real trick, because you shouldn't be able to do that. You shouldn't be able to get the working class to vote against its own interest to support the ruling class. And if the working class on both sides supported their own interest over that of the ruling class would just be fucked. There's not enough of them. Doesn't matter how much money they have. We could take their money. Like I hate to be the one to break it to you, but that's how this works. If enough of us had the right ideas and got behind the right policies, we just take their money. Sorry, we just say, yeah, there's this new law, you're not allowed to be a billionaire anymore. Yeah, there's this new thing that after you make $5 million a year, there's a 95% marginal tax rate. Yeah, but we don't worry. This is Trump inspired, so you get a gold watch. You know, Trump would want to give all the people who win capitalism a gold watch. So in honor of Trump, gold watch and a motherfucking plaque, and yeah, 95% of your money now goes to the redistribution of wealth. Oh, and by the way, thank you, because again, now we have free school, free healthcare, free daycare, a universal basic income. Everybody's got enough money to take a fucking vacation. The fucking economy's great. It's all wonderful. But yeah, we just take their fucking money. That's my plan, y'all. Y'all want to know what my vision is? Rich people, we're just gonna take your money. We're gonna take your shit. We're gonna change the law. And then we're just going to take your money and pass it around and redistribute. And there's nothing you could do about it. Not a damn thing you can do about it. Why? Because there's millions and millions and millions of us in like a couple hundred billionaires. So y'all see what this is? Y'all see what this is? If the game is about money, the few people override the best interest of fucking everybody. If we actually had solidarity, the will of everybody would be like, yeah, y'all are done. It's crazy, y'all. We really do need to get on the same page.
And this brings me back to the question I asked at the start of this video. Why is it that instead of blaming the neoliberals running our failing economic system, the blame always gets dumped on marginalized groups? And the answer is simple. Because when we're conditioned to believe that hard work guarantees success, that the so-called winners and overachievers will naturally rise and reap the rewards, it's a lot easier to scapegoat and outgroup when that promise falls apart than to question the system itself. It's reassuring to believe that all we need to do to live a fruitful life is work hard, but those—
Oh, do you hear this too?
And overachievers will naturally rise and reap the rewards. It's a lot easier to scapegoat an outgroup when that promise falls apart.
It's a lot easier to scapegoat an outgroup. And that's a lot of times, again, back to Durante's video, y'all, that's a lot of times what's going on with our ideologies. People have been so quick to turn things into us versus them, including blaming minorities, blaming women, blaming foreigners, blaming DEI, but also the ideological amongst us blaming people who don't think like you, right? You constantly see the right positioning itself as the party of God and faith and country. And then what do they say about the other side? The evil, godless left. Don't ever forget, if you're not a believer, that being godless is like the worst thing you can possibly be. And if that is not blaming the outgroup and scapegoating the outgroup rather than taking responsibility for the fact that, again, your vision sucks, I don't know what is. And so again, we have primed our people to do that, and literally think about that. When that's what the politicians and the business leaders need to do, they know exactly where to go, and they go straight to faith. They don't wander around. They don't throw a bunch of shit at the wall and see what sticks. They don't experiment with trial and error. They know exactly how to pull on the strings of people to get them to blame the outgroup. And they go straight to faith. And immediately now we're dealing with a battle of good and evil. Okay. And again, they've convinced you that somehow supporting the policies that make the billionaires richer and more powerful is somehow being on the side of good. I don't know what to tell you.
Than to question the system itself. It's reassuring to believe that all we need to do to live a fruitful life is work hard. But those who were told to work hard did work hard, and oftentimes found the results underwhelming. This creates an opening for fascistic, divisive rhetoric and strong men to rise to power. We saw this with Trump, who blamed everything on immigrants and the swamp, but once he was in office, he did nothing but serve the same corporate interests. He slashed taxes for the wealthy, he boasts a horrendous anti-labor record, and on his last day of his first presidential term, he rescinded Executive Order 13770, lifting restrictions that had made it more difficult for government officials to transition between public office and the private sector, particularly in terms of lobbying. After all that talk about draining the swamp, we were left with an even more corrupt corporate shill who used populist rhetoric to stoke hatred and distract us from the real enemy: neoliberalism. If you think this video is going to end with me calling for a return to Keynesian economics or a push towards social democracy, then you would be mistaken. Social democracy would undoubtedly improve the lives of many people living within it, but it does not adequately address the underlying issue. It's still capitalism, and therefore it is still animated by the profit motive and not human well-being. If we look back at the era where Keynesian economics ruled supreme, say in the US for instance, yes, the quality of life domestically was better. However, it's very easy to forget the fact that that way of life was paid for with the blood and sweat of the developing world. Capitalism, fundamentally, is a system founded on colonial looting and the transformation of natural resources into private property. As President Eisenhower was blessing his population with a 91% top marginal tax rate and a 52% corporate tax rate, his administration was overthrowing democratically elected leaders in Guatemala, Iran, and more, just to turn those countries into outposts where American interests could siphon away the wealth and exploit the labor and resources. So yeah.
Now, see, this is the part that is just so difficult. Is we really need to throw the capitalism baby out and all the bathwater. And again, even using the terms socialism, communism will immediately have you labeled as a godless, crazy psycho person who hates America, hates freedom, hates democracy. So the brainwashing is so deep that people have religious devotion to the problem and are actually allergic to the solution. And it's crazy that we literally have been so deeply indoctrinated with this crap that we prevent ourselves from improving our material conditions. We stop ourselves from leading better lives because our ears start burning when somebody says we need to get rid of capitalism. When, again, if you are 99.99999% of the population, yeah, capitalism is the problem. Crazy, y'all. And this is just okay. This is gonna sound weird. There's a clear desperation that comes from all of this. There's a clear, like, holy shit, we're fucked and the world is really bad. Okay. But that also could kind of be our encouragement, right? In the sense that you're not going crazy, you're not losing your mind. The world is really, really fucked up right now, and the issues and the shit is deep. Like, we are knee deep in some historical fucked upness, right? And so it's not just you, it's not just me. Like, the world is deeply fucked up, and we have to get from, again, where we're at to where we're going. So for me, there's a certain degree of, like, encouragement in recognizing it's not simply that people are all terrible and awful. That's part of the problem. But another part of the problem is that we really are, in a sense, in over our heads. And at a population level, we have not been adequately prepared for the moment. And accepting that reality, I think, can help us deal and move forward. I don't know. Y'all know I'm not the silver lining type, but hey, there you go.
Yes, although he was taxing the rich domestically and funding social programs, we often forget about all the exploitation abroad that Keynesianism or social democracies not only fail to address, but oftentimes thrive off of. Social democracy is essentially a compromise. It occurs when a capitalist state, often through tripartite negotiations, brings labor and capital together to strike a deal while emphasizing social programs and safety nets. The issue with this is that capital is still the force with all the real political pull. If capitalists decide to claw back workers' gains because their margins are looking a little thin, the state will have to side with them or else risk things like capital strikes. In practice, social democracies are still beholden to private interests. We can see the other thing is too
that this is a fantastic video. But the other thing too is, like, when you think about this system here, let's look at this picture. So we have capital over here, and like you said, when they really want to shift things, the government's got to go with them because capital strike could shut everything down. But also the workers are unable to manifest their own autonomy without a great deal of risk, right? Because they are constantly in risk of being replaced. Oh, you got a problem with it? Cool. Oh, you don't want to work for $3 less an hour? I'll just find somebody who will. Oh, y'all want to go on strike? We'll just bring in other people, right? And so there are successful strikes and successful things labor can do, but always at tremendous, tremendous risk to labor. And especially at the level of the individual, capital is ultimately still holding power over them. You always are having to go against your boss, right? To advocate for feeding your fucking family. He's literally between a rock and a goddamn hard place. Okay, but the other thing that's going on, especially in our society, is the government itself is funded by capital. So even in this situation, like, it's a little bit of a misrepresentation in the sense that it pretends like the government is like a neutral referee, and like the government can. It's like, oh yeah, well, they're going to favor capital because they can't shut down the economy, right? But in reality, they're also going to side with capital because the scale at which the elected officials have to deal, they need to be funded. Their positions are basically capital wars. Like, don't get me wrong, there are superstar politicians who break the mold and managed to get elected in an election where they were not the top fundraiser and they did not spend the most money. But the shit don't happen a lot, right? And I meant what I said earlier about like Cory. Like, that's one of the coolest things about working with Cory Booker is that he's got that je ne sais quoi. He's got that thing about him where people really like him. Like he's really charismatic speaker and people like his ideas. And for the most part, people really like the policies that he supports, right? But at the same time, the reason the man cannot be stopped, the reason the man cannot be beaten is because that man can fundraise. That man can fundraise. And that means nobody wants it with Cory Booker in the state of New Jersey. Like, trust me, because it's a recipe to go broke quickly. Right? You want to become a millionaire, start with $1 billion and run against Cory Booker. Right? Like, but that's the game, right? And it also means if he supports you or he thinks you're great and he can come and raise your hand and then they make it rain on you. Like, that's the realities. And it's not a reflection of a person's character. It's the nature of the beast. If you want to stay in office, you have to have enough money to run and win campaigns. And if you want people to believe in you and really get behind you, people have to be secure in your ability to do that. They don't want, right? It's like, because it's like investing. People don't want to. I don't want to go to a $200 a plate dinner for a candidate that's not going to win. Now, a candidate that's going to win, and then I'm going to be there when they thanking all their supporters, I'll put it down. Okay. So the political power structure is also directly funded by capital, right? And that's why, like he said, the neoliberalism is something we see on both sides, right? Because both sides rely on that same capital investments. They might spin it a little differently, be backed by slightly different people, but a lot of times they're backed by exactly the same people, because again, people with enough capital want to make sure they're greasing palms on both sides. That way they win no matter who wins. So that's where you see, for instance, like a lot of Democrats, are not coming out strong against Israel, or they're not coming out strong in support of LGBTQ people. They're not coming out strong and calling out the racism of the Trump administration. They're not coming out strong pro-labor. They're not coming out strong in favor of unions, right? Why aren't they doing that? That's so weird. You would think, again, you're the liberal party, these things would be obvious to you. Why? Well, on a lot of those things, I'm not saying all candidates at all times, but certainly enough that it's a systematic problem, their silence has been purchased. All right. So I'm just throwing that in there to be real. Like, the shit is deep, y'all.
Programs and safety nets. The issue with this is that capital is still the force with all the real political pull. If capitalists decide to claw back workers' gains because their margins are looking a little thin,
okay, I want to give you an example of that. There was something I noticed today during Cory's rally that really pissed me off. It was so small, but I don't know why your comment just reminded me of it. And what happened was, he's doing this whole all day protest, filibuster thing and trying to fight for Americans. And near the end, he actually got a big ovation. And whoever is in charge of these festivities spoke up and was like, hey, shows of support and applause for members is not permitted in the House. Like, he literally chastised the Senate for clapping. And in that moment, I thought, this is how fucking pathetic this country is. That we have more, and it speaks to the Democrats, more concern about breaking decorum over fucking applause than we do about the fact that a motherfucking felon, fascist, fucking wannabe dictator who's threatening to take over Canada and rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America has been granted fucking immunity, and the richest goddamn man in the world has been slashing and laying off thousands of government employees, literally bringing the ability of our government to provide services to people in need to a fucking halt. They have literally broken the government, and not a single time has Elon Musk's ass been dragged in front of that Senate. You know, they ain't doing it. I hate to say it. I don't give a fuck who protests and who the fuck filibusters. You could filibuster for a month. Donald Trump is not being held accountable, baby. They impeached his ass twice last time and couldn't get a fucking conviction out of it. They convicted him of 36 felonies. And the judge said, sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Trump. I know we convicted you of 36 felonies, but we're really sorry we made you show up in court every day. Don't worry. Have a nice time. Yeah, it's on the record that you were what's your sentence? Sentence. Listen to these guys. Sentence, Donald. Just sentence. What do you mean sentence? And then they gave him immunity. So what no, nothing has happened. But they shut that goddamn applause down. How fucking pathetic. I know it seems like a little moment, y'all, but it just was like, this is the fucking problem. This is the fucking problem.
Or else risk things like capital strikes. In practice, social democracies are still beholden to private interests. We can see in some of the Nordic countries today this very phenomenon occurring. Sweden is clawing back a lot of its social democratic policies and spiking on the Gini coefficient, a measure of income inequality. So, although social democracies are preferable to neoliberalism, and although I consider social democrats friends of mine, I think we can do a little better. Social democracy, at the end of the day, is still capitalism. The plunder of the third world will be and has been at the heart of the capitalist mode of production for centuries. All the neoliberal era did was bring some of that exploitation back home. When I talk about liberalism leading to fascism, it's not because I think all the ideas from liberal thinkers or the Enlightenment era are bad. I don't. Concepts like empiricism, anti-dogmatism, rationality, and freedom are great. However, the economic model that emerged from the Enlightenment era was capitalism, which I believe jeopardizes the very principles I just mentioned. Whether it takes the form of Keynesian liberalism, where the majority of the burden is placed on the developing world, or neoliberalism, where that suffering makes its way back home, the embrace of capitalism by liberals will lead to the demise of the very ideals of freedom and democracy they claim to uphold. We've seen this in Pinochet's Chile, where the interests of capital were protected by violence. We've seen it during the Reagan-Thatcher era, where the will of moneyed interests began to brazenly take priority over the will of the majority. It's not what a healthy democracy is supposed to look like.
Oh no. Oh no, not Jubilee. I hate these people. I think Jubilee epitomizes the enlightened centrist problem. All right, y'all. Look, I really like that. I want to send a quick shout out again to my homegirl Lena, because Lena's just, like I said, just been pushing me left and left and left the whole time I've known her. And yeah, I'm definitely drinking the Kool-Aid in realizing a lot of the issues with liberalism, and I certainly consider myself fully committed anti-capitalist at this point. Matter of fact, I think there's an interesting conversation to have about what do we call a modern 2025 movement. Are we socialist? Are we communist? Are we anti-capitalist? I'm open to all of the above, but I definitely feel a certain degree of comfort in being like, I know I'm damn sure anti-capitalist for sure. Yeah, like so. I'm glad we did this. I've been thinking lately about like what to cover on the channel and what type of content's worth doing. Certainly there's enough bad things going on to just do hair on fire, look at this terrible thing happening now. And certainly I got a lot of piss and vitriol for my enemies to share, but I thought this was like something like productive to like really sit down and think about how we got here, what the issues and the concerns are, and hopefully for people who watched or will see this later, hopefully that was a productive stream, like something we jumped into that was genuinely of value and educational and sort of help clarify some of these terms and what the current lay of the land is. So I enjoyed that, and I hope y'all enjoyed it too. I'm really glad I got to share that with you. I think it was a really great piece. So yeah, that's just going to do it for us. It's close to 2 hours, so appreciate y'all. Lena said, I'll take support for any political party left of the Democrats. Yeah. You know, like I think that's where we got to go. I think that's where we got to go. Like I said at the beginning, I'm definitely guilty of doing literally lesser of two evil politics. And again, given just the hair on fire panic of the moment, I that's tough. Like if you rewind the 2024 election, it's still hard for me not to vote for Kamala. Like I still think she's the best chance we get at getting not Trump. And right now my life feels like I really need not Trump. However, you know, the Democratic Party has certainly failed the task, and I think we do need to get behind a party that's very much left of the Democrats. Whether that ends up being a movement that is nominally Democrats and manages to shift enough of the base far enough left, or what to me is I just don't know which is more likely, right? Or we really see the emergence of a true leftist party. I do think ultimately the current situation is, like I said, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place between neocons and neolibs, and both are supporters of this capitalist hellscape and often funded by exactly the same people, right? And we still get the constant triangulation of neolibs basically supporting neoconservative policies and institutions and ideas, because again, they're trying to win over the neocon portion of their own base. And so it's a fucking mess. And so I appreciate you, Lena, and I definitely think you're right on about that. And even though I admit it's hard for me to follow through, I do think you're right. You know, at least in principle, I definitely think you're right. So appreciate you. Good to see everybody here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We are always hanging out in Discord if you want to chat with people offline, and then usually we're in Gather when we're available. That's how we hang out in real time. That's our virtual headquarters. It was great to see the captain, Carrie Ann, back in Gather, and I think PC and Lena are over here now. Yeah, so there's a bunch of us in there kind of chilling. So definitely check out Gather, check out Discord. PC, thanks for dropping the links. As always, there are links in the description for a bunch of our mods and friends. Definitely check out their channels if you're looking for more content. Every other Monday, I host the Black Free Thinkers on Skeptic Haven, so we'll have a show coming up this Monday. Also on Sundays, we'll be back here probably 12:30 Eastern for Hot Program. And like I said, last night, we also kicked off Secular Rising. So definitely support that organization. I know I was making jokes before about secular nonprofits. It's just because y'all, for y'all that know, if you know, you know. Sometimes there's drama, right? But in reality, I am optimistic about Secular Rising, and certainly was happy to do anything asked of me of secular rarity. So definitely check out Secular Rising. And hopefully I'll be invited. I was supposed to be on Bad Science Sunday, and I ended up not doing it because it was a holiday and my partner needed me. But hopefully that'll get rescheduled. So appreciate y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll definitely see you soon. See you next time. Said I'm gone.